Now, the World Health Organization says Russia has carried out the biggest attack on healthcare on European soil since World War II, and it's left millions of Ukrainians facing a life-threatening situation this winter. The WHO's head in Europe, Hans Kluge, said that freezing temperatures combined with a health system badly damaged in Russian missile attacks mean the winter will be about survival.
It's 0 degrees Celsius as night falls in Kherson, and Irina's home plunges into darkness. Turning on the stove is the only way to keep the family warm. In the evening when it's dark and cold, my daughter becomes nervous. She's used to light, but it's constantly dark now. Russia's missile attacks on Ukraine's power grids and other energy infrastructures means millions of Ukrainians will brave a harsh winter without proper heating. But that's not the only worry. The WHO says it has documented more than 700 attacks on health infrastructure since Russia's invasion began in late February. Hundreds of damaged hospitals lack basic facilities like water and power. And in their current state, the healthcare units cannot fully support the people.
This winter will be life-threatening for millions of people in Ukraine. The devastating energy crisis, the deepening mental health emergency, constraints on humanitarian access and the risk of viral infections will make this winter a formidable test for the Ukraine health system and the Ukraine people, but also for the world and its commitment to support Ukraine.
To ease pressure on energy resources, authorities in Kherson are urging people to leave the region if they can.
And we can get more from DW correspondent Nick Connolly, who's in the Ukrainian capital. Welcome, Nick. Can you give us a sense of the state of health facilities there after these devastating attacks?
I think, Phil, it's really difficult to kind of divide up health from all the other services here in Ukraine. Now, here in the capital, Kiev, where I am now, things are still working. You can even for a moment forget the war if you kind of don't pay attention to the news and don't happen to be near a place that's been affected by drones or bombing or some other kind of attacks. But this is a country where the energy infrastructure, by the admission of the Ukrainian government, has been destroyed to about a quarter or a third of its pre-war state, where millions of people have left, including a disproportionate number of women who are very overrepresented in the medical sphere, doctors, nurses, administrators, and those two factors together, you're having hospitals that are living off generators where they don't always know where the next canister of diesel is coming from, where they will get more complicated medicines, where they will get things like oxygen supplies if roads and infrastructure are destroyed, and lots of the people who would previously have been organising all these kind of logistics that are crucial for modern medicine, those people are no longer there or fighting in this war. So it is kind of a perfect storm, lots of different things coming at the same time, and a country that is really struggling to basically survive these constant Russian attacks on its civilian infrastructure. For now, the Ukrainian government is carrying on, it is paying wages, it is able to finance the purchase of supplies with help from Western countries who have been putting in billions of euros and dollars into Ukrainian government coffers. But there is a sense that now, after almost a year of war, that kind of initial resilience is now being chipped away at, and that if more attacks come, more attacks on the energy supply, if we have more direct attacks on transport infrastructure, then we could actually see a real decrease in the ability of the Ukrainian government to provide some kind of rudimentary medical services to its population.
Right, so daily life in some of these worsted areas, it sounds like it's just grim.
Yeah, I mean, you have people who have been without mains power for the best part of 8 months since the war began. People who are going into the fields around them, trying to look for firewood, wondering whether there are mines in those kind of hedgerows in the forests where they're looking for firewood, making that calculation whether it's worth taking those risks to get some wood to heat a stove and make some warm food, or to best stay in your darkened a house or in your cellar waiting for the shelling to end. A place like Bakhmut in Donetsk region, which is seeing some of the worst fighting now. Lots of people have left and they're being called on by the Ukrainian government to get out while they still can. But this has been the pattern all through this war, that people normally, the vast majority of people do not want to leave, especially older people refuse to leave until often enough it's too late. And then when they do want to go, when the shooting is just unbearably close, often their evacuation is very dangerous and then other people are put at risk trying to get these people out. So it's a very difficult situation and one that's likely to get a lot worse before it gets better. We heard yesterday from the people in charge of Ukraine's energy system that if things, even if there were no further major attacks by the Russians on Ukraine's energy supply, Ukrainians will be living with basically chaotic energy blackouts till the spring. That's best case scenario, but I think no one here believes that the Russians are anywhere close to ending those attacks, and seemingly the Russian tactics are increasingly to attack the logistics and the kind of hinterland of Ukraine, given how badly they're doing on the battlefield.
Okay, thank you for that, Nick. Nick Connolly in Kyiv.
Now, in Ukraine, against the odds, the Ukrainian National Railway has continued running throughout the war. Its trains have played a crucial role in helping people flee the conflict. But when Russia occupied parts of southern Ukraine 8 months ago, some of those trains stopped. Now that Kherson has been liberated, the rail link has been restored. DW's Jan-Philipp Scholz joined passengers on the train to Kherson as they head to be reunited with their loved ones.
A famous Kherson band in Kyiv station, playing for fellow Khersonites returning for the first time. Tonight, Train 102 is heading to the liberated south. Painted by artists, it's dubbed the Train to Victory, each wagon representing an occupied territory. Ludmila's daughter helps her with her bag. Everyone is keen to get aboard. The train's about to take them all home. They called me yesterday while I was at work. They told me the first train would leave tonight. I can't describe how that made me feel. The Ukrainian railway system has become a surprise star of the war. Trains have evacuated tens of thousands of people from the fighting and kept the country running. Operators say 9 out of 10 trains are still on time. At first, everyone was afraid. Now we just do our jobs. Everything's calm, everything's okay. Daybreak as we approach Kherson. Dawn shows what the war has done. Ludmila fled just after the war began. Her husband stayed. Today they'll see each other again for the first time. I'm so full of emotions. I can't believe I'm on a train back home. But I left the children in Kyiv. I'm still a bit worried about the situation, but I know things are getting better. Crowds await to see their city again joined to the rest of the country. Yet in this moment, for Ludmila and Mykola, it's just them.
To be honest, I didn't want her to come back just yet. I think it's still too dangerous. But this is her home, and her mother lives here. That's how it is.
Her personal reunion is part of an international story. Ludmila enters a city without power, dependent on aid. But she's home.
Maria Avdeeva is a security analyst and research director at the European Expert Association. That's a think tank focusing on the future of Ukraine. And she told me about her recent visit to Kherson when I spoke to her earlier.
The people in Kherson are happy because of the liberation, but the hardships they're going through are very big because the city still doesn't have electricity, water supply because pumps run on electricity, gas supply, the supermarkets only just opened. So in the cold months that Ukraine faces, it will be very difficult for people to continue living there. And we see that Russia doesn't stop the attacks on the city. Just yesterday, there was an attack on civilian buildings, residential area. One of the missiles hit actually the apartment. 4 people were injured and 1 person later on died in the hospital.
So it sounds like conditions are really quite tough, but for the civilians there, is there a sense of freedom? Is there a sense of great change?
Absolutely. People tell me that they now can breathe freely because they said that under the Russian occupation, they tried not to go out. They saw themselves, people with the black bags on their heads being taken to the prisons, tortured. They heard screams. So they tried to stay at home. And if they needed to go out, it was for a quick something outside. And now when Ukraine is back, they wear Ukrainian flags. This feeling of great patriotism is everywhere, and people are smiling, they're waving hands. So you feel this feeling of victory everywhere in the streets of Kherson.
Maria, you mentioned it earlier, the issue that there is no water, no electricity. Now, the World Health Organization is warning that the lives of millions are threatened in Ukraine because of the Russian attacks, both on energy infrastructure and on health facilities. Do you think that the incredible resolve we've seen amongst the Ukrainian population, do you think that the cold might wear them down this winter?
People are getting prepared. So Russians' tactics is now every week they fire hundreds of missiles on Ukraine. Last time it was more than 90, trying to hit every piece of energy and electricity infrastructure. Now in Odessa there is no power again. There are power shutdowns everywhere throughout the country. In a lot of smaller settlements and villages around Mykolaiv and Kherson, there's still no power, and there is no, in the upcoming weeks, probably it won't be restored, because before retreating, Russian troops exploded everything. So this will be very difficult, but people are prepared for this. A lot of them bought generators. The government advises if they can move to a safer places, do that. So people are trying to brace for these upcoming winter months, but everyone understands that it will be very difficult. And the hospitals are running on generators. So hospitals did it before, they bought enough generators. But of course, it's all the time Russia is trying to hit more and more civilian infrastructure objects.
A really, really difficult situation. Maria Adveda from the European Expert Association, thank you so much for your time.